Welcome to Wander Mode, a podcast that wanders through topics such as entrepreneurship, traveling, and mamahood. As a teacher turned entrepreneur and a mama to one, I am sharing my tips and tricks to maintain harmony in a multifaceted life. Let's wander. Today, I have the opportunity to interview Libby Trader. She is not only a business-minded woman who has seriously done it all, consulting, 13 years in Pillsbury, vice president of Green Giant, general manager at Lakewinds, COO of Airborne, and the founder of a nonprofit, but she is also a mom, grandmother, incredibly active in retirement, and my mother-in-law. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. It should be fun.
It's going to be very fun. I love podcasting because podcasting can take such interesting directions when you start with just one simple question and then the conversation becomes a life of its own. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it's going. So you had quite the career. Tell us a little bit about growing up. Did you always want to be in these higher leadership positions? Did you always know that you wanted to be in business? And then we'll kind of transition into hearing about your MBA and then all these positions that you've had the opportunity to serve in.
Going all the way back, no, I'm not sure I knew I would go on to do what I did. What I would say is in high school, that was a turning point for me because I was always expected to have jobs after school and to make my own money. And I worked for this little leather shop. And midway along, the owners decided to get out of the business and they decided to let me run it until they closed the sale or something. Anyway, it was a while. And so I suddenly, as a senior in high school, I had to hire somebody to help me out. I was running it. I was doing all the money and, making some of the products, which you had to do. Anyway, what I found was I didn't like retail. That is, meaning I didn't really like selling to Bob, who was looking for a present for somebody. I didn't really care. But I liked the business of business and the whole figuring out what to do, how to grow, all that kind of stuff. So I think business was in my mind going into college. For whatever reason, I picked marketing. Honestly, I don't think I knew. I just knew accounting was boring and the other elements of business didn't interest me. So when I graduated with my newly minted degree and I went to look and see what a marketing degree would be able to get me, I made the rude discovery that no job that I really wanted was going to come out of this bachelor's. Because I was going to have to be like a buyer at Target or something where you buy socks or whatever. And I was like, well, I don't really want to do that. So I ended up in banking. That was my second dream. But they offered me the job. At that point, I really needed the job. And so I became a credit analyst. It was a fine job. And I stayed at the bank for about 5 years. And honestly, they were good to me. I grew, you did all the stuff you were supposed to do in that first professional job. Learn how to wear high heels for an entire day, all this stuff that you do. But at the end of 5 years, I knew I was going to go nowhere. There was nowhere really that I wanted to go that they could offer. So I got my MBA, which for right or wrong, lots of employers think MBAs have magical skills that no one else has. And they only allow those jobs, certain jobs, to go to MBAs. And the job I had targeted was called brand management. And that is marketing. And that's what Pillsbury did, actually. They had a brand management program. And in a company like Pillsbury and a lot of other food companies, brand management is what's called line. And so a line position means you're in charge of the P&L. You develop the plan for the business, you're expected to execute it, and you're expected to deliver. And you do it a lot through marketing, but obviously also you have other team members who help you in their other functions. And that's what I wanted, and that's what I learned, and that's what Pillsbury gave me for 13 years was you started out on small businesses, and as you got promoted, assuming you did well, then you would move through the organization and you'd end up with bigger and bigger businesses. And that's what I did for those 13 years, and I ended up with Green Giant. I was the vice president and ran the division. But at that point, I decided to leave and I consulted. And that was a brilliant change for me for a lot of reasons, but a lot of them were personal around what I wanted my life to look like for a while. And so I consulted. Consulting was a perfect break. I worked for other companies. I learned how to build my own business. And I did things for other companies that I had done at Pillsbury. So it was a really nice respite from the sort of structure of a big company and all of that. I did it for 8 years, but at some point I got bored with that. And I took a flyer. Frankly, Lakewinds was a huge flyer for me. It was on the grocery side. It was a general manager job. And Lakewinds was floundering. They had expanded too fast. They were losing money. I didn't know the grocery business at all, but it felt like an opportunity to give a try. And I did that for 3 years and learned a ton, learned what my boundaries were and what I was not so good at and what I was good at. And at the end of 3 years, an old boss came to me and said, "We'd love it if you'd come to Airborne as the COO." And I decided it was time. And so I went to Airborne, worked with a very small team. It was a terrific experience. They were owned by an investor group. And the goal was to get it sold and make a whole bunch of money. When the company was sold, that's when I decided I'm done. I'm done working for people. I'm done working. I want to do something very different. And so that's when I made the decision to retire. That's the hopefully 30,000 feet view of whatever it is, 25, 30 years.
That's a lot of roles in 30 years. And it sounds like you had your different reasons for transitioning through each one. Now, taking me back to the Green Giant days, would you have said at that time that it was a challenge to be a female in that space? Like even with your MBA, was that an area for you in which you faced a lot of uphill battles because of that? Or did you feel like because it was marketing or perhaps maybe a little bit more of the creative side of the business that was a little more accepted?
There were challenges. Now, keeping in mind, I started there in the late 80s. I think things have improved. But the challenges I faced, I would say, is that a lot of my peers were men and they made enough money that their wives didn't have to work. So for them, even if they had families, they just didn't take so much effort to get to work. If they needed to stay late, they could. If they needed to work weekends, they could. Their life, let's say, was not nearly as exhausting as it was for those of us who were working with families and everything else. And I would also say challenges in that the upper tier, the really big cheeses, were all men. And the way they promoted into roles like the VP role was they would say, "We have to be able to imagine you in front of a group of investors. And if we can't, then you don't get promoted." And it was like, okay, I bet it's easier for you to imagine a guy in that role than a woman. And so I would say, yes, that was a challenge. What did make it easier, to your point, marketing was a little more female. More females were attracted to it. So at my level, there were more women. So you did have people you could turn to for support. And that, I think, made it fun and also made it easier. But there were definitely challenges, since there were plenty of men, let's just say.
How did you navigate those days of trying to have this career for yourself that you've worked so hard for, but then also like that motherhood aspect and trying to keep your household together when you're not there, between the hours of 8 and 6 or even longer days than that?
Structure. Endless amounts of structure. Well, first I set some rules for myself early on about how I would live my life. And one was I would never work a weekend unless I was going to be embarrassed if I didn't. And I always made it home for dinner. And I really stuck to that pretty rigidly. If I had to get up and just say I'm going to have to leave now, I just did. But around it was lots of structure. To this day, as you well know, I wake up very, very early. And it's because during all those years, I woke up at 5 a.m. so I could get to the club, so I could work out before the kids left the house, so I could stay physically fit and mentally healthy. So I think a lot of that structure helped that. So I knew what I had to do and what day and what I had to accomplish and all that. Obviously, there's downsides to that much structure, but it's sort of how I had to manage things to survive, truthfully. So.
It made it navigable, basically.
Yes, it did. And as the kids got older, it got easier when you have only one drop off, or when Ben was finally able to take the bus on his own. We could leave and I knew he would get on the bus. So things got simpler, but initially, certainly when they were young, especially, it was very challenging. We used to have this joke just among a couple of the women who had small children. And so we would say, if I show up for a meeting at 8 a.m. and after all I've done, I expect everyone to stand up and applaud because I have done more than pretty much everybody in this room by the time I get to work. And so I'll never forget this one day. One of the other women came in to an 8 a.m. meeting looking frantic, and we all stood up and applauded. The men are all looking around like, huh? What's going on here?
That is awesome.
It's funny, we had to, because you just knew. She probably had all kinds of upheavals with one kid or the other or whatever. So anyway.
Yeah. Well, and that had to have made her feel so good walking in there where you're just like, oh, shoot. Like I'm walking into this. I'm the disheveled mess that does not have my act together, and you sometimes you don't know what you are walking into.
Right. Exactly. And you might have peanut butter on your skirt. I mean, you didn't know. All you knew was you'd managed to get there. And the kids were, to the best of your ability, where they were supposed to be, hopefully with lunches or whatever it was you had to see that they had. But yes, it was at times challenging. And laughter was really the only way you could get through it sometimes.
I can't even imagine, because I remember just in the early days of our kiddo and being a teacher, our days started very early. I had to be at school by 7:20 in the morning. So that meant a very early drop off for her. And if I was walking in with a little bit of spit up on my shirt, I mean, I'm only staring at middle schoolers. I'm not staring at an entire table of men and women, adults that are pressed and ready to go for the day with spit up on my shirt.
Right, because that was long before casual Fridays, and we were expected to be in skirts and hose and heels and the whole 9 yards. So the odds that you were not completely pulled together were pretty good.
Yeah, it's like those days where you realize perhaps how we carry diaper bags around for kids with spare clothes. Maybe we need our own spare clothes in our cars at all times.
Exactly.
Okay, so you have this transition after 13 years and you go into consulting. What were some of the aspects where you would have said you were able to transition skills that you already had, but then how did you have to develop a different skill set to transition to the consulting side, which I would imagine was very different because now you're driving your own business and that schedule can be a little bit more frantic in some ways.
Here's what I would say. First is we built an office on top of the garage. So now, instead of commuting downtown every single day, my commute was to walk up the driveway and go in the back door. So I just bought myself 2 hours in a day by not having a commute, because the commute was easily an hour on either side. I could much more casually work out in the morning. It was not at 5 a.m. because I didn't have all that time in the car. So in that regard, it was much more free in terms of my lifestyle. What was hard for me, what I had to learn, was how to ask for business. Because now you're sitting in your little office and you're thinking, how am I going to find work? And what I did was I had to figure out my own way, because I'm not a salesperson by nature. So I would say, okay, I have to call like 3 people every week. And just say, I'd like to go out for coffee and just tell you a little bit about what I'm doing. So I would make myself do that. And it got easier. And then at the end of the call or like the coffee or whatever, I'd just say, hey, if you hear of anyone who needs this kind of help, if you'd pass on my name, I'd appreciate it. Easy peasy. And what I found was that usually I did not get work from that person, but I got work from somebody they referred me to. And once you get into a company, I mean, it's how consultants get their bad rap, but then you start to spread out. You go, well, I could help you out with that, or I could help you out with that. And so typically, because I was on my own, I could do that. I would go into one group, they would like what I did, and they'd tell another group. And so then the other group would call me, and then it would go on. And so I would usually get pretty deep into a company, helping out a lot of times, doing the same work. And the work I loved, in which it turned out I was pretty good at, was I would work with the management group, call it. So it could be the group that ran the company, or it could be just the group within like operations or whoever. And what I would help them do is to put together the plan for the company. I would help them work together. I had a really good sort of process for how they worked through what they were good at, what their competitors were good at, what their plan should look like, all that kind of stuff. And I did it in a very collaborative way. So they felt like it was their plan, not my plan, that I told them about. I did that a lot and I enjoyed it. was good work and it worked really well for me. So did a lot of that. And then I did fill in work besides that. But my primary work really was helping teams figure out where they wanted to go and how they wanted to get there.
The part about not being salesy is really resonating with me right now because Ben and I are transitioning to scaling our Airbnb business to include a consulting side of it. And I have found myself saying the exact same thing. I'm not a salesy person. I don't know how to do this. And I've hosted a few masterclasses now. And every time we get to the end where I'm supposed to be pitching what it is that I'm doing, I completely fumble the ball. I'm just talking all over the place and I'm justifying and I'm moving around this point and that point. So do you think that that's something that is just innately part of who somebody is? Is it just a skill you have to learn? Like, why do you think that is?
I do think there's some femaleness, although there are plenty of good, great female salespeople. So I do sometimes think women have a harder time asking quite specifically what they want, if what they want is something that will help them make money or whatever. But I guess what I'd say more, I do think it's just the way some of us are wired. I actually recall talking to a salesperson. And so I said, so how do I do this? I can't do it your way. I have to do it my way. So how do I do it? As I recall, he told me how he would do it, and then I adapted it for myself. And ultimately, what was helpful to me was I started with friends. So these are people who were in a position to give me work, but they were also in a position to appreciate what I was trying to do, or maybe I was a little uncomfortable. And they would say, you know, Libby, people do this all the time. You don't need to feel shy about this. You just ask. And if I can help you, I will. And you'd go, oh, okay. And then you did it enough times, and then it just got easier. But I would say if you can get somebody to give you the words and kind of help you with the approach and the timing, and then you practice it with people that you're comfortable with, and then say, give me some feedback on that. And my sense would be you'll build over time a way that works. And that's what I did. I just had to do it enough times so that I stopped feeling sheepish, I guess, about asking people.
And it sounds like, too, even with your consulting, that you were helping them find their own way of working together to be able to do what they wanted to do. And you had to find your own way of doing that.
Yes, I did. And as I say, once you do it a couple times and you start having some success, I think that success feeds you because you go, oh my gosh, I got this all by myself. I got this work. I'm off. I'm doing stuff. Nobody handed it to me. And all this money, whatever the money was that you managed to get from this particular job, it's all mine. You know what? It wasn't like somebody handed you your paycheck and, you know, all that kind of stuff. This is all mine. And I think it really makes you feel really good. And I guess it gives you that sense that I can make it. I can do this on my own. I don't have to have a company. I mean, there's benefits of companies, but I don't have to have one. And that's a really freeing understanding that I had never had before. So it's worth hanging in there and just keep trying approaches until you find one that works.
And you're absolutely right. There's a different drive that happens within you when you're attempting to make something work. You're not working hard so that other businesses or other individuals outside of yourself are making money as a result of your effort. It's like your effort is leading to your results. And there is something really, really powerful in that. And it's something that Ben and I have talked about a lot, actually. It's the amazing part about being an entrepreneur is you're going to work every day and everything that you're doing is driving you toward your own goals. Nobody else is setting those metrics for you. That is very, very powerful.
I remember Scott one time saying to me early on, okay, well, Libby, now what you're doing is you killed an animal, you dragged it home, and you ate it. And now you have to kill another animal, drag it home. He said, what you might want to think about is, can you kill more than one animal at the same time? Because that is purpose was when you're out there killing the animals so you can drag it home, can you start to nurture some other possibilities so more than one piece of work comes with it or it's right behind it so that you're not constantly in that, oop, I finished this one, now I got to get another one. And that was my next evolution in a way is, okay, so while I'm working on this job with somebody, I need to be out there. I need to say, hey, Bob, I didn't even realize you worked here. You know, I'd love to help you out sometime. Can we have coffee and maybe talk about anything I could do for you or whatever? And that was a new behavior for me too, but that was the next step for me. And that's what people do all the time who are on their own, but I didn't know it. I had never had to do that. So Anyway, it's a process.
It is a process. And is that how you ultimately became connected to Lake Winds, was through some sort of connection within your consulting? Or what led to that change? Because that's also taking you back to goals that are driven by that grocery industry, which you said, you didn't have like a ton of experience with.
Yeah, funny enough, no, I don't recall that I knew anybody there, truthfully. I just had decided I was done consulting. I felt like I'd sort of done what I wanted to do. What I found in consulting was that I could do that work for as long as I wanted to, but I was not likely to do a lot of other kinds of work, because what people hire you for in consulting is what you've done. They're not going to give you the next most exciting new project because that's what they want. So I felt like it had run its course, and I wanted a different challenge. And this was just a job that popped up. I don't remember if someone called me. I don't remember how I found out about it. And I thought, wow, well, this would be really different for me. It has many skills I already have. We had sold as manufacturers to grocery, but I didn't know how a grocery store operates, really. So I just decided to throw my name in the hat and managed to get the job. So there you go.
Man, you're probably going to have to give a little bit of context if you're willing to share the Princess Bear story. That sounds like such a different experience for you compared to everything you had before that. So you want to share that story and a little bit about how that came to be?
Sure. So, all my career, I had been in this very sedate, white collar kind of setting where everybody's polite. That doesn't mean they're nice, but they're always usually polite. And everything unseemly, like people getting fired, it seems like it's always done by someone else. They just go away one day. Well, Lake Winds, you had, pretty sure it was like 250 employees. They'd expanded too fast. And so they were really struggling. They had no structure. They had no processes, all the stuff that would have allowed them to successfully run these two much, much bigger stores. And a big part of it that I had to learn was all these 250 people who I felt like they were running the ship. And I don't think I appreciated how high turnover is in a place like that. And so the managers, were having to say, look, you have to put some structure in place. 3 strikes, they're out. If they don't show up for work 3 times in a row, you got to fire them. We had to set up some stuff so people knew what happened. Well, I ended up having to get in there and fire people because there weren't enough people to go around and et cetera. I got so burnt out and tired from all the people issues. And Sam, my other son, knew about that because I had said to them how it felt to have to constantly be firing people. And he and his girlfriend made this little bear. They gave this to me for a gift with a little crown top. And when you press its little hand, it says, "You're fired." and I still have the bear. I loved that bear because that is what it felt like to me, was that I would be in my little office with my little crown on, and then somebody would do something wrong and I'd say, "You're fired." and then another one would come. That's what it felt like to me. And I had never been in a situation like that. And to be fair, there were many, many lovely people who worked at Lake Winds. But because there was no structure in place for how many strikes before you were out and all that kind of stuff, it felt like at the beginning that's all we did was bring them in, move them out. That was where I learned. Somebody said, "No, Libby, here's how you do it. You hire slow, you fire fast." And I'd never heard this before. Hire slow, meaning take your time. Check the references, do all this kind of stuff, and make sure you get them a 90-day review. And then if they don't make it within that 90 days, fire them fast. Okay, whole new learning.
Because really, when they have become used to existing within a job that doesn't have structure or expectations, that's completely not conducive to running a strong business. But how do you shift that if even after 90 days, there's no change?
Oh, yeah, no, because they had nothing.
Yeah.
Their files were empty. There was nothing in them. They'd never had reviews. Nobody had ever had them. They didn't have a consistent process for how you brought people in, for what reasons you fired them. It was very chaotic, and I was not well liked, shall we say, not well liked at all when I had to put processes like that in place, because there was no way. You just couldn't have people just not showing up and having no consequences.
Yeah. Well, and I much prefer the Princess Bear, "You're fired," to didn't Donald Trump say that on his TV show?
Oh, yes,
The
he
Apprentice?
did. Yes, on The Apprentice.
And he's always, "You're fired," and I prefer the Princess Bear approach. I think that that's just fantastic. a little bit of the sunshine on that whole situation, because nobody wants to be on that side of the table. Nobody wants to be the person who's having to let an individual go because they're not turning their performance around. That would not feel good day in, day out.
No. And especially when you're having to fire people because they're potentially giving you completely made up stuff. Like, oh, I couldn't find, it was the other store. I didn't know where it was. So I was late. And you're like, really? It's like 5 miles away. What do you mean you couldn't find it? And then you're like, I don't know, maybe I'm being too hard. I don't know.
The mom that wants to give, one more cookie or 5 more minutes at the playground.
Yes. And you could not. You couldn't flinch, man. You didn't show up on time. You were late. Boom. That was your 3rd time. You're out. And I don't care what you say to me or what happens. That's just the way it has to be. Boof. Yes.
Wow.
No, it was a wild ride for me, for someone who's been in a job where they have always dealt with, lots of employees, but not for me. I'd always had I had a staff and all that and other jobs, but nothing like this where it's just different. The problems people bring to work and what have you, it's just all different. So.
Mm-hmm. Totally different industry for sure. Did you have any moments in any of these businesses, and including Airborne to your time there, that were particularly rewarding? Like where you were incredibly proud of something that came out of the work that you did, or a product that you were able to launch?
It's always hard when you're working for a larger company to think about, am I personally making an impact? Can I bring something about my moral fiber or my ethics to this job that will make a difference? And I remember we were going to discontinue a product and a very small manufacturer was producing it for us. And typically what was done was you would give them a couple months notice and then we discontinue it because you didn't want to waste space and you didn't want to lose money for very long. And the operations person came to me and said, Libby, if we cut them off, if we just in 2 months, they're going to go under because right or wrong, we're their primary business. And so I thought, he's right. We have a responsibility to them. We hired them and maybe they should have done something else, but they didn't. So we're going to give them more notice. We're going to let them know now that I think we went out a year and we said in 1 year, we're going to discontinue this product. And that's going to give you time to get some other businesses that will allow you to stay going. That seemed fair. And I remember the operations person looked at me and he almost had tears in his eyes because he was just assuming I would say, I'm sorry, we can't, because that's just the way it goes. And I remember thinking, no, there really are opportunities to do the right thing, whatever you believe that to be, in this big company where everything gets done certain ways. And I remember feeling very, proud and in a way surprised because I'm not sure I had seen opportunities like that before or realized the impact you could have by just doing the right thing again, at least in my judgment. So I think that was one moment. I don't know why I've always remembered it, just because it had a big impact to me. Because I think that idea of respect and doing the right thing was really important to me always in my career and to people, to companies, to wherever you could. I don't know, maybe that one struck me because I realized it at the moment, how important it was.
Well, and probably a very different approach than some would have taken that might have been a lot more cutthroat about the whole situation. Like you said, he was completely expecting that.
Oh, yeah, no, it was pretty typical that you never dragged it out because it was not a good proposition from a money standpoint. But I think it taught me a good lesson and reminded me of our impact in our roles. So
now, speaking of impact, I know that post-retirement, you got very involved in a nonprofit. Can you tell us about that experience and how it started?
So what happened was Sam came out of college a year or two after the worst of the recession. He was maybe out in 2010 or whatever it was. And I watched him find a job. And he would make it way down the pike on interviews, and then he'd lose out at the last. He was second, but not picked. And I remember thinking, God, I just felt so bad for him, but there's nothing I could do at the time that I could think of. Ultimately, I was able to call someone that I knew who was working at another company. He was head of sales. And I said, hey, look, I'm not asking for you to hire Sam. Would you mind just making sure his resume gets looked at just so he has an opportunity to even be considered? And he said, sure. Well, what he actually went on and did was made sure that he got interviewed, and Sam ultimately got the job. I remember thinking, not everybody has a parent with connections. I mean, I'm happy for Sam, but this seems unfair. And so I talked to this woman and we decided, let's start something. Let's start a nonprofit that would help kids that really need it. And that the big rock that we felt like they needed help with was getting an internship that would allow them to sell something and then go on and get a job after college. So what we started was this nonprofit called Upturnships. And ultimately, it was for kids who were first in family going to college, but also kids coming from often fairly rough circumstances, tough ones, where they made it to college. That was the big deal. But then they didn't know how to make the next transition, which would be to a productive, great work experience. And so we spent a lot of time training them in everything from a good handshake to how to sell yourself and some content on better writing skills and things that we could teach them just in a summer. But we married it with an internship, and we found companies who agreed to take on these kids and pay them, because that was also at a time when internships were not getting paid. Everybody thought, wow, it's great. Well, you get kids who don't have a lot of money. They can't afford a non-paying internship, so they had to pass, and they'd have to work at retail jobs. So we said, you have to pay them, and it has to be a competitive wage. You can't get away with a crappy one. And we built that up over time, the number of employers who worked with us, the kids who came every summer. And I came back from Bend to Minneapolis for like 3 summers or so to be part of the summer program. And eventually I had to just step away. It was too hard to do it. But they kept on going. So Upturnships actually, I think it's been in the last year, they went under the umbrella of Wallen Education Partners, and they now have from high school through to first job stream for kids who need that kind of help.
Wow.
Yeah, so it worked out really well. They'll have a steady stream. I mean, they've got kids coming in, and now they can take the kids all the way through. So it'll be an amazing program.
Do you have any of those kids that have gone through those programs and have continued on into careers? Have they come back to share their stories with anybody at all, or make connections with other kids in the programs through the businesses that they now run?
To be honest, I don't know what's happened to the Upturnships website, so I don't know if all their stories remained on there and if they've held onto the name. The merger happened, if you want to call it a merger, really only in the last year. But a number of the kids have gone on with great careers. It's cool stories. We had one guy I'll always remember. His mom was like in prison. His dad moved them from the south side of Chicago to try to get them in Minneapolis because he knew there were better schools, and they moved here. And he went into the program like into the second year, and he had such an amazing story of what it had taken for him to be in college. And he's working on the political side, I think, and he's just done amazing things. I mean, he's doing for others what he would have wished others could have done for him. So they've not left the world behind, meaning they've not left the people behind who would have at one time been like them. Many of them have gone on to be part of careers where they really can continue to help, which is cool.
That's amazing. It reminds me of my work with DECA at the high school in the district that I taught at. You'd go to these competitions or the international competition in another state, and you'd see these kids coming from all walks of life, and some of them have barely scraped together the money to come compete at this DECA competition to begin with. And they're sitting there in their suit, and they're trying to learn these skills to do something different with their lives. And I think that that's so powerful. And to have adults that are then able to come alongside them and partner and say, hey, we see you. Let's help you get these obstacles out of your way so that you can focus on college. And then here's hopefully the path that you're able to take afterwards. I just think that is a fantastic way of helping the future generations of business leaders or whatever it is that they're going to go on to do.
Right. Well, I think that in the process, I think what it helped me see was all the barriers that business has to bringing in this next generation of especially first in family who don't have anyone to turn to help them see how to get to that next place. I remember this young woman, her family had moved here to Minneapolis from Somalia. She was one of 9, and they moved here when she was like in elementary. She just decided, I've got to learn English. So she learned English, spoke it brilliantly. For whatever reason, she had decided she wanted to work for Cargill, and she really wanted an internship there. They were a partner company with us. She filled out the application so that she could get an internship. But at the end, it said, are you willing to move for the summer? She said no, because she couldn't, because she's one of 9. She was expected to help out at home. So she gets thrown out of the pool. And she tells us this. So I call the HR woman and I said, she got thrown out of the pool because she can't move. Surely you would help them if you moved them, right? For the summer. You would pay for their apartment or whatever. And she goes, oh, sure. Well, this young woman wouldn't have known that. She would just assume she had to pay for it and, all that. So I said, would you be willing to put her back in? Can she re-answer the question and say yes? And she said, okay, yes, we'll do that. She put it back in. She went on to win like the best intern of the summer,
Oh my gosh.
And then they ultimately hired her all because of that, because she did not understand that, of course, they would have paid her an extra stipend so that she could live somewhere else for the summer. And I thought, oh my gosh, we just don't realize. I mean, we have job fairs that we charge for even $50. They can't afford $50, so they don't go to the job fair. And probably the companies don't even realize. So I was really glad to have been part of it. I would have enjoyed spending more time, but obviously with us moving, that wasn't possible. But it was a really great experience to kind of understand how much potential these kids have, but they need a helping hand. They really need a helping hand.
Like you said, there's these little obstacles that as adults or people who are in these professions for a while, you have your blind spots. You don't think about what it is that you need to say to have kids respond to these questions in a certain way. And what missed opportunity for that company. If she's getting this award as an intern, I mean, that's a missed opportunity for that company that really would have been so unfortunate on both sides.
Yeah, it would have been, all but for not checking the box because she didn't understand how things work.
Right. What role models did you have along your journey or sources of inspiration or people that continued to push you along on your path?
I probably had a couple of key women who helped me a lot, either reached down and made sure I understood if I wasn't getting a promotion, why wasn't I? They were honest with me about maybe what was getting in my way. Or I remember this one woman, actually, she's the one who we joked about needing the round of applause upon arriving to work. She was just funny. She was a lot further up than I was. She was funny. She had 2 kids and she just made life lighter, but she was smart and capable and everything else. But she looked like somebody I felt like I could emulate more than some others that I just felt like I was not enough like them. So I remember those 2 in specific. There was a lovely guy who I worked for a number of years, and he was very fair and even-handed, and I remember he was just easy to work for. At a difficult time, it was when I had 2 small kids and everything else. But I think there were a couple of key women that were probably my biggest help and influence and all that along the way.
Mm-hmm. I know now you are a grandma of 2 young girls. What would your advice be to them if they were to come to you and say, all right, Lolly, this is what I would like to do? What would your advice be to your granddaughters as they get older?
I think that if you want something, you ask for it. So if one of them came to me and said, I want more than anything to be a firewoman, then I'd say, okay, let's go to the fire station. And why don't you talk to somebody, tell them that that's what you want to be, and get their story. How did they make it happen? The power of bringing people into what you want and having them help you see how you could get there can be an underutilized thing to do. I don't think I ever appreciated how much people want to help you. And it's a compliment when you come to them and say, I want to do what you're doing, and I would love to have you help me see how I could do it. I learned it late, and I was surprised at how helpful it can be, and that's what I would do.
I think that that's very powerful that you are saying that, because as I am sitting here thinking about fumbling the ball with the sales stuff and hearing just your experience and all that you've learned, I know that I will be coming to you after this podcast and saying, Libby, help me do what you did. Help me figure out this consulting piece, because I've shared multiple times the social media game and the sales part of the game. And I think that I have the people part of the game figured out. I understand how to teach people things through online courses. I know how to develop courses. I know how to do Canva. I know how to do all these things, but there are certain components. And I think that you're absolutely right in saying that to the grandkids, but also as I'm sitting here listening to you say that, there's so much power that can happen when you just ask for help. When you say, I want this, but I'm over here and I need a bridge. I don't know how to get there myself,
Yeah. I think it's a really powerful tool. And I think even beyond me, many people who have this skill or have done it. And then you get a couple of different approaches because one way might not fit your style, but another way might, or maybe slightly adapted. So as I say, I found there were salespeople who were just too aggressive. I couldn't ever find the words. So ask me and then ask a couple of other people. And somewhere in there, you'll find the way that works for you.
I love it. I love it. So let's end with this question. Share with me a little bit about how retirement has looked and what new things have been motivating for you, or what do you find yourself spending time doing now?
So retirement has been overall very good. I jokingly have said to people, there are still some mornings when I pinch myself and say, I can't believe I'm still retired. This is so great. And part of it is because I was always a work to live kind of person. So my job, I enjoyed it. I got much satisfaction from it. But you know those people who love their jobs. They love to work. It gives them all-consuming purpose. That was never me. Because what I would tell you, what I quickly learned in retirement is no one cares. No one cares what you did. If you were to poll the people I hang with and say, what did Libby do in her career? They'd go, I don't know, because they don't care. And so this thing that gave you all this purpose all these years is no longer material in your new life. You have to have new things to go to. And for me, we obviously have done a lot of travel, and that I have enjoyed a great deal. And it's always married with stuff that's outdoors and athletic because Scott loves it and I love it. And so it's been very fun to have the time and that setting that we can go places and go hiking and try biking and try different stuff, whether it's cross-country skiing or more downhill skiing or other stuff. And that's, for me, been a big part of the last 10 years. I feel like I added 10 years to my life by the good fortune of being able to retire at mid-50s so that we could go out and pursue all this stuff where you're really outside and enjoying yourself and staying fit. I've also enjoyed cooking more, learning how to cook stuff that's healthier and still good, tastes good, and all that's been fun, and making new friends and reading more. Honestly, I know there are a lot of people who want to be able to say when they retired, I'm busier than I ever was, and I'm not. And that's the point for me. I don't want to be busier than I ever was. That's why I retired. So it's, again, my goals are maybe a little different. I'm very content if I have a day that isn't all that busy and the next day maybe is more so. So I'm good. I did that. I'm done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've earned your time off.
That's right. That's right. I mean, retirement's not a straight line. You have to be flexible and be ready for if it starts not working. If I get to a point where I can't do a lot of this physical stuff, I'm going to have to find other things. So I will. You just have to be prepared for that. That it's a structureless space, which is overwhelming to some and can be overwhelming. And you just have to relax and figure out what you want it to look like. And it'll look that way for a while. And then you'll say, nope, now it's time to change it. That's not working. Do something different.
Mm-hmm. It's about, I guess, finding that thing that's going to drive your day. And so if that is work, then great. But for you, what drives your day is time to read or time to bike or time to travel. So then if they don't have those things and their drive then goes away, that's the recipe for disaster.
Oh, totally. I've talked to people who say I'm terrified of retirement, and that's no good. That it shouldn't be like that. That was never my deal. I was never terrified. I thought, great, I can figure this out. And I'm sure there'll be times, again, when I can't physically do a lot of this stuff. I could go find another nonprofit to work for. There's other things I haven't had a chance to do that I'm sure I will pick up and do, maybe as I slow down and I can't do as much outdoors. But right now, while I can, I'm getting ready for that marathon in September.
Yes. So Libby and I are going to complete a marathon up on the Superior hiking trail together in September. Are you excited?
I am psyched, and I am slowly adding on. So I don't want to leave you in the dust, Julie. So, just putting that out there.
Don't embarrass me. So if you're at the end and I'm coming in just barely, that I don't know how I'm going to feel about that, ending that marathon on that note.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So you'll have to tell me what your training strategies are so that we stay on an equal setting.
I'm pretty sure you'll be fine, but just want to throw that out there.
No, it's a doozy
Yeah.
of a trail. A lot of people that are listening are in Minnesota and understand the challenges that come with hiking, even just hiking on the Superior Hiking Trail, much less trying to do it in a certain amount of time for 26.2 miles.
Yeah. Yep. I try not to think about that. I'm just slowly building up.
But I think it's really cool that we're able to have that experience together. And even when you were talking about the traveling, when I look at our 3-year-old, she's going to have had all of these amazing memories of doing things with her grandparents, getting out and having these unique experiences and seeing that really like age may change different aspects of what you can do, but it doesn't have to prevent you from doing the things that you love and that you want to do. You just have to figure out how it is to accomplish those things.
Yes. A very good podcast is with Julia Dreyfus, and I'm going to forget the name of it.
Wiser Than Me. It's become one of my favorites too.
Okay, so classic from Jane Fonda, good one to end on, where Jane Fonda, who's now in her, late 80s, says, I do everything I always did. I just do it slower and with less weight.
Yeah.
I love that. I totally love that. And that's how I think about my future going forward. I'm just going to do it slower with less weight.
I love it. You can do all things with less weight.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for chatting with me. It really was a pleasure to hear about your career journey, your motherhood journey, hear advice going forward. And I just really appreciate you spending space with me today.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate it. I had a great time.
If you wandered to this point in the episode, thank you for listening to the Wander Mode podcast. Please leave a review and subscribe. You can follow me on Instagram and Facebook at WanderModeCo. Reach me by email at julie@wandermode.co. Until next time, wander on.